Tonight, Superman himself can't believe how stupid his first arc ended up being. Hawkman decides to upgrade his ghost problem into a zombie problem, and Teen Titans decided to skip the B plot and go straight to the Z plot for all I could possibly care about it. All that and more this week on the Not So New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 25 of the Not So New 52. I am your host, and on this week back in 2012, literally nothing happened. Like nothing. I went back, I checked the DC Comics news, there was nothing. This was the most boring week on Earth for DC Comics, so yeah, I don't really have a lot to open up this show with. I guess I could just say what comics came out this week, the stuff we're going to be talking about. There are 14 of them this week, and they include the number 6 issues of Batman the Dark Knight, Superman, Green Lantern New Guardians, Aquaman, The Flash, The Fury of Firestorm, The Nuclear Man, The Savage Hawkman, All-Star Western, Blackhawks, Voodoo, Teen Titans, I, Vampire, and Justice League Dark. Additionally, we have the number 3 issue of the 4-issue miniseries, The Ray. So yeah, that's all we're really going to be doing. I really wish I had something more to talk about, just because it doesn't feel like a properly good intro if I just sit here and say, here's what we will be doing. Okay, let's do it. But genuinely, that's all I'm left with. So that's what we will be doing. So okay, let's do it. Batman the Dark Knight, written by Paul Jenkins and Joe Harris, art by David Finch. We left off last issue with Batman going on a tear against Superman for the entirety of the issue and then just being shut down, seemingly dead. This issue opens up with a flashback to the alley, and his mother and father are dead, and he's talking about how sad he is. And then as they fade off into the light, he wakes up and sees Superman standing over him. And Superman's like, oh, geez, Batman, I'm so sorry that I hit you. And Batman's like, no, it's good, it's good. As it turns out, this toxin burns out of my system if I have adrenaline to counteract it. It is its own immunity or something. So he tells Superman, you got to go find the Flash, since the Flash got infected with probably the same thing. And in order to stop the Flash from dying, because his metabolism is somehow just charging it up, we have to actually get his adrenaline pumping. So Superman goes off to do that, and Batman's like, okay, that was dumb. I really could have died battling Superman. That was straight up on me. He didn't blink, and I managed to nearly die. So that's cool. But he looks out, he sees the White Rabbit, and gives chase. So then we cut back to Gotham. And we just get a little interlude here with Gordon, who's catching some of the Arkham escapees again. And he's on the phone with Agent Forbes, a.k.a. the Internal Affairs guy. And Forbes is like, Gordon, I'm going to go ahead and suggest to the mayor that you are suspended without pay indefinitely because you are a terrible cop. And Gordon just unloads on him. I'm like, you're doing nothing to help. I am out here doing everything, and I'm doing it the best I can, blah, 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 blah. And it basically boils down to like, well, if you're having such a hard time, Gordon, why don't you just call Batman? And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about, Forbes. And he's like, all right, well, lawyer up, asshole. And he hangs up on him. Gordon asks if Batman's been seen anywhere, but obviously not, because he's out in the woods. And so we cut back to Batman, who's still giving chase to the White Rabbit. We get a breakdown of who the White Rabbit is in Alice in Wonderland and how he's possibly one of the most sane characters there, despite the rest of the world being crazy. And when he finally catches up to her, she's poised there with Scarecrow, and Scarecrow's like, oh, this is no storybook, Batman. You're in the real game now. And he lunges after Batman, and Batman just immediately knocks him out, wraps him up, and is like, I am sick of your crap, dude. I am so done with all of this. And so he talks to White Rabbit, and White Rabbit's just like, well, I guess you've got it all figured out, but tell me, did you see this coming? And then we cut over to Superman, who catches up with Flash and basically tells him the exact thing Batman said, and Flash is like, I mean, is there anything else I can do, like, right now to not let it metabolize? And he's like, well, you got to think of it like a snake bite. We're trying to get the venom out of your system. And Flash is like, venom? That can only mean one character. So then we cut back to Batman and the White Rabbit, and he turns around, and who's there? Throwing a punch into Batman's face, but Bane. And the next 9 pages of this book are just Bane. It's very fast in that regard. It's just Bane sitting there going like, yes, Batman, I've made you afraid of me because I'm the one who snapped your back, which he does directly say, which means that did happen some point in these 5 years before Batman is here now. So just keep that in your head. So yeah, he just goes on and on saying like, oh, tell me you're not afraid of me, Batman. Batman's like, I'm not afraid of you. And then Bane just punches him again. He's like, you're a liar. You're totally afraid of me. And as he just taunts Batman more and more, Batman's looking around for Poison Ivy, because I completely forgot that was like the entire reason that he was here in the first place. And Bane's like, yes, she's nearby, but I'm going to break your spine before you can find her. So he sends an electric shock off on Bane, and he barely manages to get like slightly away before Bane just throws a big rock at him. And the big reveal at the end is that Bane's like, you've analyzed my new venom, which I guess this enhanced fear gas is also new venom. And he's like, it may turn all of their minds to jelly, but me, it only makes me smarter. And that's literally how it ends. It just says that Bane's now smarter on this new drug. Okay, fine. Like, here's the thing. Since issue 1, I think, since we first saw jacked out, roided up Two-Face, I knew this was going to be a Bane thing. Because it just, like, no duh. That's his entire thing, is that he gets big with the drug. Like, that had to be what it was. So this wasn't really a reveal so much as it was okay, we're finally here now. Which is why I think it didn't end the issue with the reveal that it was Bane. Because that was the mid-page. That was in the middle of the book where it's like, oh no, Bane's here. The reveal they're going for is the fact that somehow this makes him smarter, which, again, there isn't a thing that... There's no reason why it should happen. It just says it'll turn a lesser man's brain to jelly. So, okay. It's just because Bane's that good. Because Bane, that's why. I don't know. I feel like the writers wanted to make the Bane reveal the last page reveal, but then they realized they didn't have enough way to pad out the entire issue, or they realized, oh, maybe we shouldn't pad out the entire issue. So instead they just made it like this half-hearted thing of like, oh, but Batman's now in for the fight of his life because Bane's smart now, despite the fact that I'm pretty sure as a character he's always been intelligent and strong, but whatever. Overall, it's okay. It's fine. Like I said, the entire back half is just padding, and honestly, the Flash going back to, like, doesn't feel like much of anything. It was just so Flash could come to the realization slightly before Batman did, because Superman happened to use an analogy. And then the rest of the page, like, the only thing that I feel like really happened in this whole book was the Gordon page of him just saying, like, hey, you suck, internal affairs. I'm a good cop. Where's Batman? That's the only thing that feels like forward progress for anything here. Batman, he just defeats Scarecrow because Scarecrow ran off, but he easily could have done that in the previous issue. There's no reason to shunt it off to here. And then the whole Bane thing is just like, yeah, we were always going to get here. So I'm giving this a 6, and that's mostly on art and just the general flow of it. The writing itself is just like, okay, whatever, we're here. So, yeah, I'm not that impressed with it. I don't know where this arc's going to end because this is like an oversized trade. So we'll see what happens next issue if we're even close to wrapping this up. I'll try to remember Poison Ivy's a part of the story, but frankly, I don't get it anymore. I don't know what like the point of this story is. Don't be afraid. If that's going to be the whole moral, then I wish I would have gotten out sooner. Superman number 6, written by George Perez, Keith Giffen, and Dan Jurgens. Art by Nicola Scott, Keith Giffen, and Dan Jurgens, though I think those last two are strictly for the last page of this book. So last issue we left off with Superman, quote unquote, dropping a reporter from the top of the Daily Planet and the real Superman waking up in space with a bunch of bugs on him. This issue picks up immediately after he drops the reporter, and Supergirl swings in to save him and straight up says, hey, this issue takes place immediately after Superboy number 6, because she references how she ran into a clone of Superman and came right here to talk to Clark. And so the next 4 pages on this are just an extended fight scene of Superman being like, oh, you are not supposed to be here yet. My plan will have to adjust accordingly. Bam, 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 shoot with heat vision. Repeat 3 times. And Lois Lane is freaking out like, oh my god, people in the helicopter, stay back, but make sure you keep getting this. I have to make sure I don't lose any reporters today. And somehow, as we established in the last page of the last book, Superman is able to hear Lois just screaming out for Clark. And as it turns out, in space, he's having a mind meld with this fake Superman down on Earth. And as he's regaining consciousness, the fake Superman is struggling to maintain his composure or whatever, so Supergirl manages to land a few punches. And while that's going on, the real Superman's able to look into this fake Superman's mind and basically see the history of it. And apparently it was a homeworld called Jazur that relied very heavily on nanobots, and they are able to basically fix anything. If something broke, the nanobots just immediately fixed it. If the citizens themselves on this planet were killed or hurt in any way, the nanobots could just straight up repair them. They were perfect. So the Collector of Worlds from the Action Comics arc that's still going on apparently collected their planet because it was such a big deal that he had this basic immortality thing. But because it was incompatible with his current system or something, the planet as he collected it exploded, but a few itty-bitty tiny nanobots survived, went onto the armor that Clark picked up in the Collector's ship, and he's like, oh, I've had you around with me for literal 5 years now. Huh. And so he's coming to this realization, telling him to get out of his head. They have a little mind fight for a second as Supergirl is literally fighting him down on Earth. It just keeps going. Honest to God, it just keeps going here. And apparently one of the things is that General Lane is now okay, there's a superpower fight in the middle of Metropolis. We're going to go level the city with nuclear bombardment. I got to call my daughter and tell her to get out. And she's like, don't you do that. You just let Superman do his thing. God. So as the fight's going on, Superman from space comes down and gets the nanobot Superman and just picks him up and takes him out. Just straight up not dealing with it anymore. Supergirl is recovering for a second. And Superman stands over the town and he's like, hey, everyone, just letting you know, this is a fake Superman. I'm the real Superman. And I'm going to go deal with this. Okay, cool. Is everyone good? So he immediately just zooms off because he also sees the planes coming to drop the nuclear bombardment. And so as soon as he zooms off, they're like, well, I guess we have no reason to bomb the city anymore. Turn around. So he goes all the way up to the Arctic, or maybe down to the Antarctic, hard to tell. And he basically recaps, exactly how anything that happened. And 5 years ago, he came back with his new fancy suit, his armor, and he had the nanobots on him, and the nanobots actually, went into him. But the nanobots were all about adaptation. So they were adapting to Superman this entire time. And mind you, he's explaining all this while he's just beating the ever-loving crap out of this fake Superman. So apparently when he used his heat vision, the nanobots were in the lasers and were adapting to the extreme heat of it, thus causing the fire monster. When he used his cold breath, it automatically adapted to the coldness of it, or at least the windiness of it, thus making that ice monster thing. And then, when he was using his super senses of seeing and hearing, the nanobots somehow came out there, and adjusted to like Superman's ability to see, therefore making the invisible monster, which I believe Superman puts it best here in a quote, "How did that make any sense?" Wholeheartedly agree. So anyway, that's all the stuff that happens. And as he's fighting the Superman, he's just like basically transforming into dust. Like he's just completely disintegrating. Why now? I don't know, but he is. So he beats the crap out of Superman, dissolves into dust. Fake Superman, I should say. And then Supergirl shows up and is like, "Oh, hey, that was quite a bit you did to that alien imposter." And Superman's like, "It's no big deal. Were you talking about me having a clone?" And he's like, "Yeah, don't worry about it. Also, how did you hear that? I was saying that to the alien thing." It's like, "Oh, we had a mind meld in space." So anyway, McCoy gets on TV, apologizes for being so hard on Superman, and then tries to cash in on the fact that he was dropped off a building by Superman. The woman who turned into the ice monster is sitting in a hospital bed. Clark's there by her side, and apparently she's like, "Hey, you don't really have any feelings for me, do you?" And he's like, "No, I know that you do," which is more than I ever got from that, because I genuinely couldn't tell they ever had a thing. But she's like, "Oh, it's okay, Clark. I know that one day you'll find the woman who's right for you," as Lois Lane is standing outside the door, and I guess that's what we're supposed to get from that. And there's a one-page epilogue here of the events of Stormwatch number 5, I think, of the planet, like the spaceship crashing out of orbit or whatever. A part of it falls to Earth, lands in the Arctic or Antarctic, and goes to something steps out and is going to a Daemonite outpost and is activating it. And that's it. It just says Daemonite outpost activated. Sure, whatever. I cannot stand how this ended. This was so just that you had to have Superman literally say, "That doesn't make any sense." Just sums up my feelings with this entire thing. Mind you, that entire fight scene, like both fight scenes between Supergirl and between the fake Superman, they were just constantly talking. Like the first one had the guys in the newscopter be like, "Oh, that's quite a hit on Supergirl, and she comes back with a right hook." It's like, shut up. Just shut up. Why do I need this? Just let the art tell me what's happened. I don't need to... And then the same thing's happening in the end, but at least that's just full-on exposition of explaining what the hell I've been reading for 6 issues now. I really don't like this arc as a whole, and fortunately or unfortunately, due to the history of how George Perez was treated during the writing of this, he is off after this issue. So hopefully we can get something better out of it, but I don't blame the writer for that as much as I blame the situation he was in. Just Google it if you need to. As for this particular book, I'm giving it a 4, mainly for art. The art is okay to look at. There's nothing that's like bad about it. I understood everything it was going for. It didn't confuse me in any placement of anything. It's just the writing that was awful. Like truly abysmal. So overall 4. I'm so happy we're getting something different next issue. Green Lantern New Guardians number 6, written by Tony Bedard, art by Tyler Kirkham. We left off last issue with the Angel Invictus, this guardian of the solar system that they are on, being summoned from the sun and coming to attack everyone. This issue opens up with the solar system, the orrery itself, starting to move through space and just annihilating all these ships that were standing around it, just burning them up in the sun. As this foghorn goes off, just alerting people, "Oh, Invictus is coming, everyone run!" And as it goes off, Kyle realizes, okay, nobody else knows what that foghorn means, probably, so I need to use my ring to talk to them. So he goes, "Ring, get me in contact with them." And he's like, "You do understand that your ring is a Green Lantern ring and all of their rings are other Lantern rings? Like, we're not synced up like that." And Kyle's like, "Oh yeah? Well, I feel fear, and I feel rage, and I feel compassion, so do it." And the Ring's like, "All right." And it just does it. So he calls up all the other ones, and they're like, "Hey, by the way, that thing is a big bad coming. We got to regroup now." And they're like, I mean, what's his powers? What are we doing?" He's like, "I don't know, but he's definitely a fight, so stay on your toes, but get to a place where we can regroup. Follow my signal." But then it cuts out as Fatality and Monk are the first ones on Okara who come across Invictus, who literally steps out of his own statue and is just like, you guys are sinners, and I am here to cleanse the blackness from you. And so he literally, like, they're like, psh, we're not afraid of you. And he blasts them one time, and they are immediately like, oh, okay, yeah, no, we're going to die. We are actually, like, dying here. Like, Monk is barely alive as it is. So as he's about to do a second blast, Fatality makes it over to Monk, and they teleport out to where Arkillo and Saint Walker are. And they try to warn them slightly. They're like, hey, we got to go. And Saint Walker takes them away as Arkillo is standing guard. And, of course, they're standing next to the statue. So he steps out of the statue again, and Arkillo's like, oh, all right, cool. I am... He basically steps on. He's like, oh, are you a sinner as well? And he's like, you know I am. And starts trying to fight Invictus. And Invictus is like, you don't fear that I'm going to damn you to hell? And he's like, I am fear. And he crashes down and destroys the temple that they were standing on. And immediately Invictus is like, well, you shouldn't have done that. Starts just destroying Arkillo. Like, he looks like he's pretty much dead. I'm sure he's fine in the short term. But Saint Walker goes over and he's like, oh, Arkillo, stay back. I can deal with this. But before he even has a chance, Kyle finally comes in and drops an entire, like, replica Titanic on him. And he was like, hey, guys, sorry we're late. We better go quickly. But before he can even get that out, Invictus just destroys the construct, sending it in all directions. He's like, you guys must have been sent by the Beast. And because of that, you will all die. And he looks at Glomulus and he's like, you're a construct of the Beast. You're definitely going to die. And Glomulus is like, help, please. So Saint Walker gets up and he walks over to Invictus and he's like, I'm not here to kill you. I'm here to heal you. And he uses his blue lantern light, but it does nothing. And he's like, this is supposed to show you something that will heal what's wrong with you, but it's not working. And Invictus is like, there's nothing wrong with me. I am the Archangel Invictus, and you are the ones who have embraced the darkness. So he grabs Saint Walker by the head, and it seems like he's about to, like, crush it pretty much. As we get a zoom out to the rest of the orrery, and we see Bleeze has returned. She's out in space, and she's trying to find the location of the lanterns, but it is the entire orrery is impervious to scans, so she's saying, well, I'm just going to have to burn it all down then. And that's where we leave off. It's a pretty brief issue overall. It's fine. I like it. It's a good continuation. I think they do a really good job of setting up how big of a threat Invictus is. Like, he steps in, does one thing, and just immediately levels the playing field. Like, nobody's able to deal with this. And in a lot of ways, you could think, like, okay, well, now they're just making him OP. But they really do set it up, even in the issue before this, of just the reverence he has. Like, he is a god to these people. So it makes sense that he's able to do all of this stuff. I'm not that opposed to it. My only critique in terms of why it is that Larfleeze is the big beast of this. Like, why is he essentially the devil to Invictus's godhood? Because if none of the other lanterns can stand up to him at all, I don't feel like Larfleeze would put up that much of a fight. But maybe that's just me mentally not understanding the power level that Larfleeze is at. I don't know. I'm sure we'll get more explanation as time goes on. But the return of Bleeze is, of course, expected. But, you know, why she's coming in now, I guess we'll see. Overall, I did enjoy this issue. The art's fantastic. I really like the way they characterized Arkillo in this, of just like, yeah, no, I'm ready to fight whoever. That's God. I'm going to punch him in the face. So, overall, solid issue. I'm going to give this one a 7.5 out of 10. It is very well done. It's written very well. I think my only major critique in terms of the writing is that while this is specifically Invictus's issue, it's specifically showing how much power he has. I feel like it didn't really further anything. Like, everyone's just afraid of Invictus, which I mean, needed to happen. When I say didn't further anything, it's not a bad, because it's such a minor critique. It is just in terms of this issue was just a showcase of how much of a big bad Invictus is. Nobody made any further strides to understanding anything else, which doesn't need to happen in every issue. I'm not saying it does. It would honestly feel overstuffed if they did that. But that my only thing is like, maybe this could have been more spread out over the course of several issues of showing how hopelessly outclassed they are, at the risk of just turning into basically like a Dragon Ball style anime where it's just more and more power levels keep showing up. I don't know. Honestly, I don't have much to really fault it on. The 7.5 just felt right for me. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the next issue and seeing how at least this trade wraps up. Aquaman number 6, written by Geoff Johns, art by Ivan Reis and Joe Prado. We left off last issue with a one-shot of Aquaman being trapped in the desert. He gets rescued after finding out some secrets about Atlantis being sunk, and when he gets back home, he finds out his wife, Mara, has gone for dog food. I say wife, I don't think they're actually married yet. So yeah, this issue opens up 4 years ago. Mara is training to do something as she's being taunted with like, oh, he's going to control the seas, but you will control the waters. You can do it. And it's revealed that she is talking to her father and is saying, I will kill Aquaman. Aquaman will die. So we cut to today at a grocery store. You got a girl named Jennifer and a guy named Randy. And Randy's just a skeevy, sleazy manager who's telling Jennifer how pretty she would look with more makeup. And as Jennifer's about to like pretty much be a problem for HR, if you can understand that, Mara steps in and was just like, excuse me, hi, I need food for my dog, and I've never done that before, and I just didn't realize there'd be so many options. Can someone help me? And Jennifer steps up and is like, hey, you're Aquawoman. And she's like, I don't call myself that. If you want to do it, whatever, I don't care. So, but then Randy intervenes and is like, well, hey, pretty lady, I think I could help you out. And he just starts like touching her hair and touching her body. And she's like, please stop doing that. I do not wish to be touched. And as he's looking over her outfit and is like, wow, pretty glittery suit. Let me see if I can find the zipper. She grabs Randy's arm and just snaps it, like without even thinking, just. And everyone hears his scream and is just like, oh my God, she just broke that guy's arm. And he's like, yeah, he was touching me without my permission, and hopefully he'll remember not to do it again. But people are calling like 911, and like the security guards show up and they're like, ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to stand down. And Mara just controls all the water from inside the place because she doesn't appreciate having a gun pointed at her. And she's like, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to put down the gun because I'm not exactly into that either. So she uses the water, knocks it out of his hands, and immediately becomes some big incident. So Randy's getting medical treatment, even though it's just, a broken arm, but he's playing it up to be some big thing of how terrified he is of Aquawoman. And as Aquawoman's being basically told by the cops, you need to stand down. Like, you have committed a crime, and even if you are innocent in the end, we do still have to, take you in. But they're getting a call from another police unit that apparently some guy named Ryan Slater in town, he was gonna go away to prison, but he got a guard's gun and is now holding his daughter hostage. So they have to go deal with that. And Mary hears all this. She's like, okay, I surrender. I go willingly. Let's go take care of whatever you need to take care of. So she gets the handcuffs on. She's sitting in the back of the car so they can go deal with the Ryan Slater thing. And he's holding a gun to his daughter's head and saying, everyone back off or I'm going to blow her brains out. And so Aquawoman hears that and just takes off the handcuffs, breaks them, just steps out of the car, kicking the door off, mind you. And everyone's like, hey, get back in the... What are you doing? And they're like, all right, fine, Aquawoman's going to deal with it. And Ryan's like, you're Aquawoman? Seriously? You're going to help this? And she's like, what if I am? And he's like, you're not near any water. We're in the middle of the suburbs. You can't do anything to me. And she specifically says, you don't understand. I control all water. And she starts pulling water out of his body and saying, like, the absence of water is not my weakness. It's all of yours. Right now, you're 1 day dehydrated. You're already getting headaches, muscle cramps. Now you're 2 days. Your pulse is getting messed up. You're going to get blurred vision. Now you're 3 days. And the cop steps in and is like, can you stop? You're going to kill him. And he's like, he's already killed his wife and he's about to kill his daughter. What do you care if I kill him? It's like, that's not how we do things, Aquawoman. And eventually the daughter steps in and is like, I would care. I really don't want you to kill my dad. Please don't. And she's like, I don't understand you people. I genuinely don't. So she just takes off and flies away. And the cops are like, you're still under arrest. All right, whatever. So then we see her crouching by the edge of the shore. She makes a water construct of her father. And we get back to that flashback. But now she's like, hey, Aquaman's not all that bad. Like, he doesn't kill people. He's actually a good king. He doesn't even know that our colony exists. So, yeah, he's noble, and I don't want to kill him anymore. And the dad's like, all right, you're a traitor, and we're going to kill you because you're a traitor. And she's like, over my dead body. I'm not going to let you kill Aquaman. But we see that she does feel bad because that was her people, and she had to give them up. So then we get a shot of Jennifer here. Jennifer comes up to Aquawoman. Mara, I shouldn't say Aquawoman, but they say it consistently in this issue, so it's stuck in my head. But she steps up and is like, hey, I remember you said you needed stuff for the dog, and I'm really glad that you helped out with my thing of Randy being a creep. So here's all the dog stuff you'll ever need, and if you ever need more, just give me a call. And she's like, why are you doing this for me? She's like, I don't know, I want you to know that we're not all bad up here on the surface. And she's like, no, I guess you're not. So then we see the dog being fed, and Arthur's in his full Aquaman gear. And she starts recounting her day of all the people she met. And he's like, can we talk on the way? We got to go talk to Dr. Stephen Shin. And she's like, why? He's like, well, he's going to tell us who sunk Atlantis. And Mare's like, he's going to tell us what? And that's where the issue ends. There is a little flash forward issue part here of Atlantis was once the most powerful nation on Earth, but in one night it was destroyed. Now the quest begins to answer the question that no one's ever asked. Who sunk Atlantis? Tune in next week. So, yeah, it was good. It was a very good issue. It was a good one-shot that really examined Mara and how she sees people on land. She's very much in terms of her own, I don't want to say nobility, but she is her own person. She doesn't appreciate being talked down to, and you just get a feel for like what her character is like and how she responds to things with quite a bit of violence is the short answer of that. But yeah, I enjoy taking the time out to just get this direct look at a character that personally I've never gotten much attention on. So I like that overall. Art-wise, it's fantastic. The only issue I may have is there's a couple shots of the father with the gun that just, I don't know, it feels off from the rest of the art, and I don't know why. I think it's something in the eyes, but it's such a minor critique. So overall, I'm going to give this a 7.5. I guess we'll find out next month who sunk Atlantis, but overall, with this first arc, in terms of the trench and then the two one-shots following up afterwards, I'm definitely enjoying Aquaman. It is a very well-done book. The Flash, number 6, written by Brian Buccellato and Francis Manapul, art also by Manapul. We left off last issue with Dr. Elias meeting up with Flash and saying how the Speed Force can basically rip apart the space-time continuum and it needs to be destroyed. This issue pretty much ignores that for a while. So we open up with Flash throwing a punch and just talking about, Captain Cold. He had some freeze guns and he had his rogues, but he always had a sense of honor. He would never hurt innocent people, especially no murder. But today, that doesn't seem to be the case. And as Barry's going to throw this punch, we see Captain Cold is not only able to catch it, it's meaning that he is stronger, Barry is slower, but also Captain Cold literally has freeze powers. Like, he's able to make ice from nothing. So, that's a thing. And we see that Barry is out in the middle of like a river or something, and there's a bunch of steamboats that are raised way high up on ice pillars and are precariously perched to fall over at a moment's notice. The rest of this issue is told pretty out of sequence, so I'm just going to hit the major points. Barry and Patty are making their way back from some investigation, I think. It was when they were telling a story. Or they were on vacation, but then Patty was actually going because there was some story about a famous murder that was labeled as an abduction, but like the evidence suggests it was a murder, so she's going to try to solve it. And Barry comments that Iris West actually did an expose on it. So she's like, oh, cool. So you can go ahead and hook me up with Iris so I can get all the details. And Barry's like, sure, yeah, I guess. And we get a little cutesy thing here of them officially being boyfriend-girlfriend now. So, yeah. We cut to last night where Dr. Elias is talking to Barry and is basically saying, okay, here's the deal. We don't have to destroy the Speed Force so long as you stay underneath a certain amount of Speed Force energy. I made this thing that will like pop up in your cowl to say how much Speed Force energy you've built up. And when you've built up a lot of energy, you can come down here to the newly built treadmill, which won't be torn apart because it's so gosh darn big. And you can just burn off all the energy, which will then power the city as well. We can use that energy to power things. So as long as you don't go over, I think they say 80% of max energy, you're good. And Barry's like, cool. So then we cut to this morning, and we see Captain Cold is in the hospital room with his dying sister. And he's talking to a doctor, and the doctor, like, he's basically telling the doctor, like, you told me that we needed this expensive medical equipment in order to operate on her. You also said that we couldn't move her. So I brought the equipment to you, and now you're saying that you can't do it? And he's like, yeah, we don't have power. The EMP is still a thing. Like, we're still in the Stone Age. And he's like, I swear to God, this is all because of the Flash. My sister is going to die because of the Flash, and therefore I'm now going to break my code, is the gist of it. So then we go back 15 minutes ago. We see it's a decently nice day, sunny day. They're out on this boat restaurant, and it's Barry, Patty, and Iris just talking about, oh, it's nice that you didn't run that Flash hit piece that you were doing before. And he's like, well, the Flash may have been a little bit cool last time we met. And as Iris brings up whether or not they're dating, Barry's like, I gotta go to the bathroom. So he steps away. 5 minutes ago, Captain Cold shows up, starts freezing the river, takes the boats and raises them up into the air on ice pillars, thus causing everybody to like start shifting wildly. And that takes us to now, where this fight's going on. And it's basically just standard fight. You know, they're running around. We see that Barry is exclusively worried about the boat that Patty and Iris are on because it is starting to crumble like off the pillar. It is literally starting to fall. It's ripping in half. And we see that the half that has Iris on it is the one that's falling off first. So Barry's having to run even faster to like catch it and protect it and whatnot. And we see that he's building up the Speed Force energy more and more and more. It's at 72%, where 80 is, of course, the last safe limit. So as he's fighting against Cold, trying to stop this fight before it gets too far, he gets past 80%. He's getting into critical levels. And we see that the other half of the boat, which has Patty in it, is falling down to the ground. And as Barry sees it literally crashing into the ice, seemingly killing everyone on board, he hits 98% energy level. So can he save it? Can he do it? I don't know. I think this is good. I think it's a good start to the Captain Cold arc, if that's what this is going to be. I feel like it set up the character well of explaining, okay, somehow he has powers. We still haven't gotten full distinction on how that happened, but somehow he has powers. But it says, like, okay, he's now more of a threat also because he's willing to break his code. Because someone close to him has been hurt by the Flash, so therefore he feels he can hurt the Flash as well. Like, he's willing to break that code. I like how they set that up. In terms of this story, it's a little bit disjointed because of, you know, it being told completely out of sequence. But all in all, it flows decently nicely. There are certain bits where it's like the part where Captain Cold actually shows up and starts freezing things. I feel like we could have gone without, just because it's like, well, yeah, clearly he did, as evident by the last page we were on. But it doesn't feel like it's wasted space. It just feels like this is what they chose to do with it. The art is fantastic the whole way through. My only major critique in terms of writing is that, like, because we keep cutting back to the fight across the entire issue, you can basically feel like the entire issue is Barry just yelling out for Patty, like, the entire time. As soon as that ship is first shown to be crumbling at all, it's just Patty, Barry, Patty, Barry. And of course she's calling for Barry, not because she knows he's the Flash, but because Barry's still in the bathroom and no one can find him. So I don't know, it's a little bit obnoxious in that regard, but whatever, I'm willing to deal with that if the rest of the writing stays up to this quality otherwise. So overall, I'm going to go ahead and give this one a 7. It just doesn't strike me as anything too amazing yet, but it feels like it could build to something there, especially because, like, he's literally doing the thing that's about to tear apart the space-time continuum. Even if we completely ignore Captain Cold after that point, that's a good setup for something happening, something big happening. So I'm definitely down for that. Captain Cold stuff, if we stick with that, is going to be interesting on its own, but probably just not breathtaking. So yeah, 7 for this particular issue. See what comes next. The Fury of Firestorm, The Nuclear Men, number 6, written by Ethan Van Sciver and Gail Simone, art by Yıldıray Çınar. We left off last issue with a terrorist event at a music festival, something where a foreign firestorm exploded and just killed everybody. And now we're dealing with that. And we see Ronnie and Jason, they're standing in the crater that was the stadium. Ronnie is clearly freaking out, like, a lot, whereas Jason's just kind of trying to process it and deal with what happened. And as Ronnie's standing there, he's like, oh my god, we're coated in dust. This dust was people. I'm breathing it in. And as he freaks out over that, as Jason's trying to calm him down, Ronnie just flies off immediately into a lake just to try to scrub himself clean. And the heat of him being Firestorm just literally burns through the lake. It just incinerates it, turns it to steam. Jason arrives and he's like, hey, look, it's fine. We can make more water. Like, that's easy. And he's like, what are we supposed to do? Like, what we couldn't even stop the guy who did this. What in the hell are we supposed to do right now? And Jason's like, I don't know. Straight, like, I have no clue what to do here. Maybe we just, I don't know, man, let's just sit here and pray. I don't even know if I know how to do that anymore, but let's give it a shot. So they sit down for just a moment. And, of course, standing over on the cliffside is Pozar, and he's like, well, this should be easy huntings, considering these guys just blew up a stadium. So he flies in, ready to punch, and just starts firing at them. And as they get ready to fight, they prepare a little, he explains who he is. He's like, hello, my name is Mikhail. You can call me Pozar. I hunt firestorms, and I'm here to kill you. So Ronnie immediately jumps in, starts throwing punches, because he thinks that this guy is associated with the dude who just self-destructed at the stadium. But immediately Pozar just shows how hopelessly outclassed they are. He's just easily taking pot shots and just talking down to them the whole way through. And as Jason tries to intervene, Pozar causes vines to come up underneath the ground and wrap around Jason, taking him out for a little bit as he continues to attack Ronnie. And he asks Ronnie, like, hey, who made you? And Ronnie's like, I don't know, God. And he's like, oh, okay, funny. You're a funny guy, huh? Let's see how you deal without this, though. And he just thinks it. He just, without any sort of effort, just thinks it. And he turns off Ronnie's firestorm powers. Just turns him back into a normal guy. And as he steps up to Ronnie, he's like, okay, hold on. This was too easy. I don't think you guys are capable of causing that terrorist act. And Jason's like, yeah, no, we were there to try to stop it. And he's like, oh, all right. Well, I'll be leaving now. And Pozar just flies off, and we get his self-narration that these guys probably know Professor Stein, so they're worth keeping alive. And, you know, they weren't responsible for the thing, so may as well just keep them around for now, just see what they do. And he just flies off, and Jason also turns back into his human form. And Ronnie's like, all right, let's go take out that guy. Let's go follow him. And Jason's like, are you stupid? He just turned off your powers, man. We cannot deal with that. And Ronnie just gets angrier and angrier, saying like, are you serious? We're just supposed to sit here and do nothing? And he's like, dude, we're the ones who are in trouble here. Like, we just witnessed a mass killing. Did you forget about that? And Ronnie does not take that well. Throws a punch to Jason and lays down the ultimatum of like, we're following them. End of discussion. And he's like, oh, end of discussion. All right. So they both transform back into Firestorm and start fighting. And it's not just, your average tiff that they were having. Like, apparently they were saying very hurtful things, very deep cuts to each other. And they are throwing real punches. And as they're fighting, they transform into fury again, but immediately separate back out because they're like, no, we got to deal with this. Like, we're not joining together. We're fighting this out. And as they continue to fight, they keep on merging a little bit each time. And Jason's able to see into Ronnie's mind and realize it's not going to work. There's no way that he's ever going to change Ronnie's mind. So there's no way they can continue on. So they land, and Jason's like, all right, we're done. You do whatever you want to do, but we're no longer a team. And Ronnie flies off saying, fine by me. Good luck forgetting what happened at the stadium. So as Jason's standing there, he gets a call from Zither, and she's like, yeah, hey, sorry for what you experienced, but we've got a bigger issue because the terrorist attack was shown on TV. Like, people saw that, and now everyone knows about you and the Firestorm. So I need you to listen very carefully. I need you to run, because we see, as Jason's just standing there, he's surrounded not only by reporters, but also the military and police as well. So leave off on that. I like this issue in so much as the first, 2/3 of it. I really like the fact of just Ronnie and Jason having no idea how to deal with this. Just being like, oh, we went in for a quick little superhero job, and now we've just, we were ground zero for this horrific effect. I really like how they did that. The way Ronnie just straight up broke down. Very well done. The second part with Posar showing up, I didn't like as much, but it still felt like a good next part where he was because we knew that he was hunting down these Firestorms. It's been established over the past issue or two. So the fact that it got to this point and he just showed up and he's like, okay, but I have a reason to keep you around. You weren't immediately responsible for this. You were trying to help. It shows some grayish morality to Posar, whereas everyone we've encountered so far, I feel like has been a pretty obvious just villain, including Zither, which I'm still convinced is a thing. This one is the first time where it feels like Posar could be I still think he's going to turn out to be a villain, but I think that he's going to be more morally complex than what we've been already seeing. The third part, I don't know. I like the end result of them coming to the conclusion of them not being together anymore, and I guess we had to have a fight to get there, but it just felt like they've been fighting for the past 6 issues. The only time they weren't fighting was just this last one, issue 5, and that still felt like it came out of nowhere. So it didn't feel earned to me that this fight was the one that was the real one, but I agree that at the end of the issue they had to be at the point of, no, we're not going to be able to see eye to eye on this because it's just a traumatic event. That's all it is. You can't really deal with that the same way you deal with other stuff. So overall, I'm going to go ahead and this one a 7. I do enjoy it in the general terms, and the art is pretty fantastic throughout. Again, especially on the first 3 pages, you get a good 9-panel grid of just the grief hitting Ronnie and the double-page spread of him freaking out. Both very good. So 7 for this issue. Looking forward to seeing what happens in the next trade. The Savage Hawkman number 6, written by Tony S. Daniel and James Bonny, art by Philip Tan. We left off last issue with Hawkman fighting against a bunch of apparitions, spirits, whatever, and coming across the Gentleman Ghost, who is like, hey, I'm the villain of this arc. So this issue opens up on a recap page that basically just tells us everything that we've been going to up to this point with his visions of the dead and whatnot. And we pick up here with him talking to Gentleman Ghost, and Gentleman Ghost is like, hey, by the way, this was all my plan to have you here. I invited you here. Here's what I need. I need you to go find the Mortis orb for me because I'm like 90% sure that your nth metal has some very special properties that are going to interact with it. And Savage Hawkman's like, you don't know anything about nth metal. I don't even know anything about nth metal. He's like, right, sure, whatever. Totally don't know anything about nth metal. But yeah, it's going to react weird, so I need you to go do that for me. And they fight for a little bit, and Hawkman, of course, can't land any hits at all because the spears are just incorporeal, but they can hurt him because of whatever magic. And as he's getting pretty much torn apart, he grabs Digby, the guy who led him here in the first place, and just takes him. He's just like, all right, we're going, bye. And Gentleman Ghost is like, all right, have fun getting my orb. So he questions Digby for a little bit just about more history of what this orb is. And apparently a man who was allegedly a warlock named Julius Gates had it. He died, and ever since then it's been missing. But he lived in a creepy old mansion just outside the city, so that's where they're going next. So Hawkman picks him up, drags him along, and they go to the mansion. We get a quick little glimpse of Emma showing up at Carter's apartment, but he's not there, obviously. The neighbor, Singh, meets her and is just like, hey, he's gone. He said he was going out to do something, and he saw something like monsters crashing through the windows, and I was like, all right, yeah, that's pretty much on par for how weird he is. Hey, if he shows back up, could you give me a call? It'd mean a lot. And he's like, cool, what's your number? And that's exactly where that plot leaves off. So then we go back to the mansion bit. They arrive. It's completely run down. It doesn't look like anyone is there. But as it turns out, Julius's widow is actually still alive and is still living in the house. And they're like, are you good? You've just been living in this house? And it's just like, she mistakenly thinks that Hawkman is Julius for whatever reason. But she's like, oh, no, never mind. You're not my Julius. You know, he comes and visits me sometimes. And it's like, oh, yeah, because he's dead. And that's kind of the thing that's been going on in this arc. Tell me, do you know what the Mortis orb is? And she's like, yeah, no, he's buried with it. He's literally, he talked about it all the time. And so at that point, they're like, all right, well, where's your husband buried? And it's like, oh, he's out in the cemetery, not too far from here. And like, wow, this is incredibly easy. So they get up and they go to the cemetery. Digby has it pulled up GPS on his phone. And they find the grave of the person. And Digby's asking some questions about nth metal, and Hawkman's very defensive for some reason, but whatever. So as they're starting to digging up the grave, apparently it smells like sulfur in the graveyard, and as Hawkman touches the Mortis orb, this unbelievable surge of power goes through him that he can feel in his bones. But of course, at that moment, zombies. The entire graveyard starts waking up. They all start plowing through their graves and start attacking Hawkman. And he starts lopping off heads, realizing that they're after the Mortis orb, but he's not sure that he's actually doing anything because they keep on coming after him regardless. And of course, as he's starting to be overrun, Gentleman Ghost shows up and he's like, hey, thanks for finding that orb for me. Took me a while to figure out that you could do it, but the power of the orb was rendered inert because of a spell by the warlock. But touching nth metal caused that to basically reset. So now it's at full power, and I can use it to get my body back. Because, again, I'm just a ghost. So thanks for that. Oh, and by the way, me getting my body back is basically going to kill every man, woman, and child in, like, several miles around me. So just letting you know that I'm super evil like that. So Hawkman immediately flies up, and he's like, all right, how bad is this? And he sees zombies in, like, all directions. And he makes his way to the Brooklyn Bridge, and he sees people running for their lives because, again, zombie invasion. And we see the final page is him standing over, like, on one of the towers of the Brooklyn Bridge, and a reporter being like, it's being reported that the dead have come back to life. And Hawkman's like, this is kind of my fault. And that's where we leave off. It's a fine issue. I mean, it moved at a breakneck pace. We got, like, Gentleman Ghost explaining, here's exactly what I need from you. And Hawkman being like, I'm not going to do that. But then he does it. Like, to the point where there's one part where Digby says, oh, they've been searching for this stuff for, like, centuries and nobody's ever found it. And I'm like, dude, the old lady just said it as soon as someone asked. Did no one think to ever ask the old lady? Also, did he actually say centuries now that I'm thinking about it? Because that old lady is still alive. It was hidden for centuries. Never mind. Hidden until Julius Gates found it. Okay. The writing's not that far off. But regardless, like, it just seemed way too easy. And I think the point was that either he didn't know how many issues he had left and wanted to wrap this up on zombies, or he genuinely, like, thought, okay, we need to move this through quickly for whatever reason. Because the fact that they took a whole issue to just set up that he was having visions. And then they took this issue to not only deal with the first fight, deal with a second fight, deal with zombies coming back, deal with the introduction, the finding, and the taking of the Mortisword. Like, all of this combined, way too much for one issue. But I like it in terms of the fact of, it seems like a lightweight arc. It doesn't seem like this is going to have any sort of lasting impact on pretty much anything. So I don't mind that we're not spending too much time on it, if that makes any sense. So overall, I'm going to go ahead and give this one a 6. My primary complaint boils down to, once we start getting into like the zombie attacks and stuff like that, all the fight scenes pretty much just kind of feel murky and dark and blending together. I don't get any real sense of action outside of the sound lines of swoosh and smoosh chak. Like, everything else just kind of blends together of a general pile of limbs. But writing wise, it's just breakneck, so I'm okay with that for this particular arc. If it was anything heavier, I would probably critique it more, but for something as simple as, and yeah, there's an orb that makes zombies, it's fine. All-Star Western number 6, written by Justin Gray and Jimmy Palmiotti, art by Moritat. We left off last issue with Hex and Arkham making their way through a cave system, and after many trials coming across a giant bat, because of course they did. This issue picks up pretty much exactly where we left off, of Hex just fighting off the bat, just doing his best he can. It takes like 3 pages and a cool splash page in the middle, but he does manage to do so and essentially drive an axe into its heart. And as he's doing so, Hex is like, God damn it, this sucks. But then Arkham's like, well, we're not done yet. And he points over to a nearby cliff. And part of that native tribe that attacked them last issue is standing there now. But instead of attacking them, they seem to be impressed by the feat that Hex just pulled off. And they start trying to talk to him, but like, they're not getting anywhere, clearly. But he tries expressing that they are trying to get up and out. And one of the natives points upwards to just this hole in the cave surrounded by like moss and vines. And he's like, that's the way you got to go. And Arkham's like, oh, of course it had to be more climbing. And Hex is like, all right, stop your complaining, let's go. So they start climbing their way up, and they're like, just trying to figure out where they're going to pop out at. And when they finally get out, they realize they are pretty much right outside of Wayne Manor, which is currently home to Alan and Catherine Wayne. So they pop down, and Arkham's like, hey, these guys are actually pretty good. They're pretty cool. So let me do the talking, and hopefully we can get some hospitality. So he knocks on the door, and Catherine answers. And Arkham's like, oh, could you please allow us in just for a moment to clean ourselves and eat and drink and whatnot. And so they go in, and they basically tell the whole story to Alan and Catherine. And Alan's like, well, we must inform the authorities immediately. This is quite absurd. And he's like, yeah, no, this is probably a good job for the law to get involved, because it was, a lot of people down there. And Alan seems surprised that such crazy things could be in caves beneath their house, including a giant bat in a cave. Bat cave? What? So Alan gets his top hat and says, gentlemen, let us ride. And we cut to some time later where the cops are raiding the underground facility, and the big dude who was causing so many problems last time is firing off shots. Everyone's firing shots, really. Hex is making his way through, though, trying to catch up to the big dude, and he's not taking any prisoners in the meantime. When he does finally arrive, There's one guy who is trying to defend the bigger guy for whatever reason, and Hex just puts a bullet in his brain and starts moving on anyway. Hex puts a bullet in the shoulder of the bigger guy and was like, "Oh, we're not done. We've got plenty more to go." And he takes out his like hatchet that has a pickaxe on the back and starts burying it into the big guy's leg, while asking where the boy was that he was hired to find like 2 issues ago. And immediately this just goes down to torture, like straight up and out. And Arkham's like, I can't let you torture a man. And he's like, then stop me, as he keeps on doing it to ask for the boy's location. And the big guy basically lets out, like, why would we kidnap that boy? His father is the one who's doing the whole operation. And Arkham's like, that doesn't make any sense. And Arkham's like, no, I think I get it. Sorry, Hex is like that. So we cut back to in the slums of Gotham, and we're making our way back to the family of the boy that was rescued, like the one that was found but had been down there for like 3 years. And as it turns out, long story short, the poor family kidnapped the rich family's son and spread the rumor that he was abducted down in those same shafts so that someone would actually take it seriously, because when a rich little boy is abducted, it's a big deal compared to the poor ones. So they were just using this in order to basically free everybody. And the kid wasn't harmed. He was kept totally safe, well fed, just, hidden. And the boy realized, like, he made friends with the family. The kid who was kidnapped made friends with the family. And we see that the boy who was still recovering from his treatment down in the mines for 3 years, turns out that he passes away right then. And Hex is like, this is all your dad's fault, kid. Just letting you know that. And he explains the situation as to what happened. And the boy's like, yeah, my dad's an asshole, but I'm not going to be like him. And so they decide that the best thing to do is move now to arrest the rich guy and bring the boy back to his home. But as they arrive to the Moody household, he's gone. He's left on a business trip, and they don't know when he's going to return. And the wife is made aware that the actions that he portrayed are pretty much concrete. Like, there's no way that he didn't do this, and he's just never going to be returning home. He's going down to New Orleans, and he's staying down there. And just offhandedly want to mention that the Moody household is covered in owls. Like, top to bottom, just owl taxidermies. So, yeah. So anyway, he's like, all right, your husband's never coming back, and he's down in New Orleans, and he owes me $50,000 because I brought his son home. Regardless of whether or not he meant it or not, he owes me $50,000. So he's going down to New Orleans to collect. And it's not entirely clear if Arkham's coming with. But then we cut to New Orleans. We see a big bar fight going on. People knocked out all over. And some guy's running in with a telegraph for a pair of people. I don't know how to... It's a guy who's got like a domino mask on, but in full cowboy gear, and he's got a white bird on his chest. And then there's a busty woman in a trench coat who's also got a gun. They don't have names, but that's where we leave off, and they find out that Jonah Hex is on his way down to New Orleans. It's fine. It's good. I feel like the bat thing was just like, okay, what crazy ass thing can we have him encounter at the end of this? Like, the entire last bit of the cave, I think, really was just like, okay, we've spent enough time down in this cave. Let's just get him out real quick. So they just really quickly killed the bat, really quickly showed them an exit, and then just really quickly wrapped up everything else. Like, I'm not sure what... The fact that the reveal of the plot took a good probably 5 to 6 pages makes me feel like, okay, we were going to stretch this out for another issue, but we really got to condense some stuff down right now for some reason. And I don't know what that reason is. Genuinely don't know. But it felt really condensed because there's no way they could have really shortened the explanation. They had to do what they did. But everything else just felt so rushed. Not in a terrible way. It felt well done, but it did feel rushed. So in terms of its own thing, I would give it a 6.5. I think it's well enough done. It didn't do as good of a job reminding me as to what the initial plot was, because I genuinely had to go back and check about the whole like rich kid and the 50,000 thing. Like I I just forgot about that. The giant bat and like the dude holding the gun to Arkham's head, those two cliffhangers were like the only things in my head. I couldn't even remember why he went down in those mines to begin with. So a fault on the book as a whole, but this particular issue is fine enough, and I give it a 6.5 for everything it's doing. Blackhawks number 6, written by Mike Costa, art by Carlos Urbano. We left off last issue with end of an arc, but Kunoichi apparently is infected with the mother machine intelligence and whatever. Doesn't really apply to this issue. This issue picks up with battle going on in the middle of Buenos Aires, Argentina. Blackhawks are fighting against some sort of modular machine with AI. It's a bunch of like bugs, but like the size of a Roomba, that anything they touch they can infect with their AI, and the more that they get together, the smarter they get. So they're trying to destroy these things, but the aircraft that they're trying to bring in order to basically drop the bomb is not shielded from the like AI. Like it can, if they touch it, the plane will be taken. So they got to come up with some sort of plan in order to destroy these things. And we see Kunoichi come up with the plan that as soon as she throws up like some battery pack that's highly explosive, they shoot at it and it turns into an electromagnetic pulse that then wipes out the cameras that were filming this whole thing. And then we cut to the UN headquarters where the dude in charge is giving through a speech basically to reporters saying like, all right, and that's what the Blackhawks do. They're the militarized quote unquote UN branch. And take some questions, basic ones like, hey, we also have a book called Justice League International that's part of the UN. Why do we need the Blackhawks? And it's like, Justice League International are like public, like showy stuff. This is for more like down-to-earth stuff, specifically that dealing with technology. And they're like, oh, well, these people don't have superpowers. But that one girl threw that battery pack that weighed like 100 pounds very far in the air. And it's like, yeah, that's her own personal stuff. She'll come out of that whenever. And then they said, like, okay, so your whole thing for the Blackhawks is protecting people from technological threats. But technology is just a path of the future. Like, what right do you have to declare what is or is not, like, too much for the human race to handle? And basically he makes the analogy of like, yeah, well, maybe humanity's destiny is to die by like some deadly virus, but that doesn't mean that we have to sit down and just take it. Like we have to be able to fight back against the things that threaten civilization. And then we see all this is on TV being relayed into a bar, and there's Irishman and Attila sitting there having a beer, and they ask for the TV to be shut off because they just don't want to hear about work right now. And as they're sitting there in silence, Irishman finally chimes up, explaining the situation he had once where he had to dig his own grave because he was ambushed and back when he was in the military. And as he was digging it, he turned the shovel around, attacked his attackers, and managed to make his escape. But because of that, he's deaf in one ear. And they're like, that can't be true. You've passed all your physicals. And he's like, yeah, I kind of bribed the guy who's doing the physicals to give me a passing grade each time. And then Attila recounts a similar situation where he ran away from a mafia, basically associated household, I guess you could say, in order to go do his own thing and do the right stuff. But yeah, he managed to escape his own grave because he would have died in that house if otherwise. And they just relent on the fact of, everything's gotten so complicated with like nano machines and stuff like that. Miss the days where you could just shoot at something. And then we go to the Blackhawks HQ, which is basically giving public tours now, which Lady Blackhawk is relaying to Lincoln. Is like, this is the dumbest possible thing we could be doing. And Lincoln's like, yeah, it is. Let me show you something. And he relates to her that they have a unit called the Black Razor, which we've seen in several other books at this point, that are basically the super secretive branch of the Blackhawks. If they were covert before, these ones are super covert. And they are specifically dealing with alien technology. So the UN doesn't even know about it. It's totally top secret. And now Lady Blackhawk knows about it. And they watch the interview that he's giving, the UN agent's giving to the public tour, and it's just explaining stuff. And as they're viewing it through like all this super secret high-tech stuff, apparently 2 of the cameramans recording are using a very highly sophisticated encryption scheme in terms of like beaming out the data. So they are definitely suspect. So they get one of the guards, Canada, to go over and like very subtly talk to them and see if he can like figure out who they are and what they're doing before it gets escalated. Meanwhile, Wildman is trying to crack the encryption. So Canada steps up, and as soon as he says like anything, he's like, "Excuse me," they pull out a gun and start like an attack. Immediately they're knocked out, and the UN agent's like, "See? We caught the threat before it happened. Aren't we so good at our jobs?" Lady Blackhawk brings in the cameras for Wildman to analyze and leaves him in the room. Meanwhile, she gets a call from Attila and Irishmen who apparently were in that bar in order to talk to an informant who they had to beat up for information. And the informant said something about the name Matteo Bischoff, which doesn't mean anything to them inherently, but he passes off the information to Lady Blackhawk. Meanwhile, Canada relates on the fact of like, man, they were really obvious out in that crowd. It's like they wanted to get caught. It's almost as if it was a trap. Oh my God. And he runs off to go tell Wildman. But we see the Wildman has just cracked the code, and it translates to "Greetings from Matteo Bischoff." And as soon as he does that, the cameras explode, seemingly blowing apart not only Wildman, but like half the facility. And that's where we leave off. I think this is a good start to however the series is going to go. Because again, this was one of the books that got canceled at issue 8, so we are nearing the end here. But I think it's a solid start to, okay, a new player has entered into the field. They clearly have a good amount of technology and stuff like that. Even if we didn't get that great of an intro to them, I think it did a good job of setting up that they are qualified to be the villain of this arc. So it's a good setup there. We'll see how it deals with in the next 2 issues, but I think it's doing a decent job as it is now. Art-wise, can't complain. Everything's pretty much fine. I do think that taking the time to just characterize Irishman and Attila, because they really are the ones that didn't get really any character time in the first arc, it felt out of place in this particular issue because there was just so much other stuff going on. But I get why they did it. And if they remain a more central focus for the next 2 issues, I'll be more apologetic for it. But as it stands now, it's like, it felt really out of place to just get like, yeah, here's my tragic backstory. Okay, whatever. So overall, I'm going to give this one I'm giving it a 7. I think it is a very well done issue, and I think that it sets the stakes well enough. Moving forward for this last bit, it's not just another and then they went and did the secret tech thing like it was for the first 2 issues of the last arc. So see how it goes from there, but we are coming to the end of Blackhawks as we know it. Voodoo number 6, written by Joshua Williamson, art by Sami Basri. We left off last issue with Voodoo and literally everybody else, including the audience, being made aware that Voodoo is a clone. She is a clone of a human being, an actual person named Priscilla Catane, who is currently in custody of the Black Razors, which are a military group, whatever. So this issue picks up where Voodoo's kind of just having an existential crisis for a second as everything's crashing down around her because the reactor core is apparently damaged on the Damonite ship. But as it's doing its little countdown, she's like, okay, I'm going to go talk to the guys in charge of my mission, and I'm going to go get some answers. Technically, shouldn't be doing that, but definitely going to do that. So she opens up a portal, goes through, and everything starts exploding around her. Meanwhile, we go to the Black Razor bunker, and Fallon and Blackjack basically come to the conclusion of the only way that we're going to be able to do this is if we break out the original Priscilla. That's just how we're going to be able to use her against her, because the original Priscilla was also experimented on by the Damonites. So she has something special about her. So anyway, they basically come in, guns blazing, and start essentially attacking everybody inside this Black Razor unit and just going in to get Priscilla. It's just a breakout. So, of course, everyone's like, Blackjack, you're one of us. Why are you fighting against us? And he's like, hey, don't ask too many questions and just stay down so I don't have to hit you harder. And as he's calling over the intercom for Fallon shows up in Black Razor gear, wearing like what seems to be like a Green Lantern shield, but I'm sure it isn't. But anyway, she's just ready to go, kick some ass, take some names. Meanwhile, we go to the Damonite ship that supposedly Voodoo transported to. We see the 3 other halflings, whatever you want to call them, half-breeds, that were in the other one that fought Kyle Rayner earlier. They're walking on the ship, and apparently they've got new orders to go back and complete their missions on Earth, but as soon as they get there, they see Kyle Rayner, and it's like, oh, back down now or you'll have to face the wrath of the Green Lantern. And they're like, you're not Kyle. We know what Green Lantern smells like. You're not him. And it's like, fine. And she transforms back into Voodoo. And immediately the one guy's like, hey, is your mission complete? Do you have the info on the superheroes? Because we kind of need that right now. Because this whole big thing happened in Grifter number 6. So are you good or not? And she basically like, hey, I'm going to see the War Council. And he's like, yeah, fat chance you are. And as he's laughing at her, she just slits his throat and says like, nah, I'm going to go see the War Council. So the other 2 girls that are with him transform. They start to fight, but then Voodoo uses her shape-shifting abilities to turn into the Damonite, like, Lord, called the Black Curate. Again, just listen to my thing on Grifter number 6. And starts attacking them, but they just, like, bow down. They're like, no, please, we are at your mercy. And he's like, okay, cool. Do you know anything about Voodoo being a clone? And they're like, oh, what? We have no idea what you're talking about. I was like, fine, run away, be weak. I'm going to go talk to the War Council. So she runs on. We go back to the Black Razor prison. Priscilla wakes up. She sees that there are some scientists that are going to be escorting her out, despite the fact that she just wants to go home. She just wants to be free. Like, she hates being trapped here. But they're like, oh, no, see, we're going to undo whatever they did with you. We just need to run some more tests. And she's like, oh, this sucks. So they're about to put a sedative in her. The scientist says that he's truly sorry, but, is he? And then as the sedative's about to go in, Fallon and Blackjack show up, blasting everybody in sight. They free Priscilla, and the scientist is like, are you guys crazy? She could be a danger to, like, everyone here. And as she gets one of her arms free, she just clocks the guy in the face. And she comments how, like, hey, I've been held up vertically for, like, months. I am not able to walk right now. Luckily, she doesn't have to. She just focuses for a second and she sprouts wings. And she's like, yeah, this is one of the things they did to me when they experimented on me. So let's just fly out of here. And she's also very pissed off at the Damonites, if that wasn't clear, that they need to die for the things they did to her. So anyway, they fly out, and apparently Blackjack's concerned that the real boss will find out what they're doing. So then we cut to Blackhawks. We cut to the leader of the Blackhawks, Lincoln, who's getting a call saying that Fallon and Blackjack just did this thing. And Lincoln's like, oh, okay, they are both good agents, so they must have had a good reason, so let them out for now, but I hope that they know what they're doing. So, yeah, read Blackhawks, I guess. I don't know. Then we go back to Voodoo. She's busting her way in. The Damonites, once again, now not disguised, just a full-on pure Damonites. They're like, hey, stop. You're not getting into the War Council. You're a half-breed, and we don't care about your kind. And immediately they start launching into attack on her. She starts fighting her way through, and she seems to be doing a good job, but at some point she gets overrun because there's just too many of them. Then we cut to basically just like the War Council. They're all just talking about the events of Grifter number 6. Seriously, these books are so intertwined now, and I didn't see that coming. So they're like, hey, so they're mentioning Stormwatch in this as well. So all of these books that are bearing like the Edge covers are all intertwined. But they're like, okay, so here's the deal. We need to lead someone else into battle. I volunteer to be the general. And then as soon as he volunteers, he gets smacked in the face with something. And they all look over at the door. And in front of a pile of dead Damonite bodies is Voodoo saying like, hey, my name is Voodoo. And I got some questions. And that's where we leave off. Okay, so the issue on its own I like. I really do enjoy this issue. I think that the art is good. I think it has a good sense of, like, parallel stories both being told. One person trying to break in order to get answers, the other person trying to break out the other person. So it's got nice parallel symmetries there. I like the way the story is told. My only thing is that I don't know how easily this story is understood by someone who hasn't been reading literally all the other Damonite-related comics. Stormwatch, Grifter, there was one other one that I can't remember. Blackhawks is in there now as well. Like, I feel like you got to be reading the entirety of the Edge line in order to get what's going on here. But at the same time, maybe that's just me. Maybe it is actually more penetrable than I think it is. So I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt and assume it is more penetrable, in which case I'm giving this a 7. I think it's a well-done story. It's not anything incredible. It didn't do anything that, like, blew me away. The biggest, like, shock moment in the whole thing is Priscilla having wings, which were just played off in, like, it was like a tiny panel at the bottom of one of these pages. Like, it wasn't played for a big moment. So overall, 7. I am liking the story. I'm liking what it's doing. It definitely feels like it's found its footing into the story it wants to tell, and I'm interested to see where it goes from there. Teen Titans number 6, written by Scott Lobdell, art by Brett Booth. We left off last issue with the team being horribly, horribly beaten by Superboy and pretty much nothing else. This issue, I'm going to try to get through real quick because there's not a lot that happens. The Teen Titans are limping their way back home, trying to just get through New York, but they are stopped by the cops, specifically a detective, Jocelyn Lore, who is basically like, hey, you guys kind of split a battleship in half and caused $300 million in damages. So, and everyone's like, this was in self-defense. You can't hold us responsible for that, please. But as they're arguing their point, who shows up but Skitter and starts attacking the cop, basically throws her aside, and Red Robin makes sure she's knocked out for the next part. And as Robin and Wonder Girl are prepped to fight Skitter again because, you know, she was very hostile before, Bunker gets in the way and is just like, hey, she's our friend. And, like, tries to do the whole, like, do you remember me deep down? And, of course, she does, and she cuddles up to Bunker and says, like, all right, cool, that worked out. But then they look over at Bart Allen, Kid Flash, and he is not able to control his, like, vibrations, and he's freaking out. And there's caption boxes saying, like, oh, he doesn't know who he is or how he got his powers, and he was hoping that by going public somebody could help him explain. But now that he might be killed by his powers freaking out. So they're in kind of a bind here. We cut over 10 minutes later to Star Labs, where Virgil Hawkins, a.k.a. Static, is working. He's supposed to be doing something on a particle accelerator, but he built a mechanical raptor instead because, yeah. And Red Robin just shows up in his lab and was like, hey, Virgil, you're super smart, and I've got an emergency for you. So can you please help me out? Virgil's like, yeah, sure, whatever. I'm just happy I'm in a book. So they bring him Bart, and he's like, oh, okay, he is literally falling apart, like, at the seams. Like, his molecules are destabilizing. We got to get him in to the testing room pronto. So they run in there. There's a whole subplot about a villain I will get to at the end because it doesn't matter now. We cut to a shot of Jocelyn McClure, and as it turns out, she's speaking to herself in Interlac. She recognized Kid Flash as a villain, or as a bad guy, I guess you could say, from, I guess, the future, because he's saying this isn't supposed to have happened yet. And they're like, do they even know who Bart Allen really is? That's going to come up later, I'm sure. So Bart's freaking out that he may be dying without getting any sort of answers. And I'm completely blanking on her name. The girl. Solstice. That's the one. Solstice is just calming him down. They run some tests. And when they get some answers to it, they're like, okay, it's still bad, but now he has some idea as to how to fix it if they just cobble together something out of all the technology inside this lab. So in the end, they put together a suit that's going to hold Bart together, and apparently he needs to have some knowledge on, like, quantum speed theory and its effect on human physiology. So he just very quickly reads the book, he throws on the suit, and now we've got the Kid Flash outfit that I'm sure we're sticking with for the rest of the series. And as the gang is like, all right, well, let's go fight Superboy because we're ready now. And Red Robin's like, no, we're not. We got to go back and prepare for war. That's the main story. We also have a subplot of Wonder Girl, Bunker, and Skitter just doing their own thing elsewhere. And a villain in Star Labs named Grim can sense that they're in the building. And he uses his abilities to control the mind of Skitter because she's the most susceptible to mind control, I guess. Wonder Girl's talking about leaving. Bunker's like, no, you got to stay with us. You're awesome. And she's like, are you hitting on me? And he's like, I'm gay. Because that's had to be reminded. So Skitter, being mind control, goes and breaks out Grim. They start to fight. And as Wonder Girl throws her lasso onto Grim, he sends back her rage back at her. And then as she's knocked out on the ground, he paralyzes her with, like, toxins from her skin. This guy can do like a billion things. And then as she's held down there and he's like, oh, now I'm going to snap your pretty little neck, Bunker just smacks him with some of the psionic bricks and he's out. And that's it. And they're like, oh, we got lucky. What happens when we're not so lucky? That's where we leave. Okay, A plot, like, fine, whatever. They set it up in that Superboy made Flash run faster than he's ever run before. And like he was approaching the limits of thought, which I guess are faster than light. But regardless, it's not the best plot. If we just need to get him into the costume, fine. I'm willing to take whatever. If that was the main goal of this, of getting him into the Kid Flash costume, fine. My primary issue comes from that B plot because it's like, Jesus Christ, man, we just introduced this guy. He has like 1 billion powers, none of which really relate to each other. And then we just knock him out. And if we're going to use him later, fine, we're going to use him later. Like, whatever. But in this particular instance, he just felt like such a pushover because it was just, Bunker's just like, oh, I thought of a brick and it knocked him out. Like, what? What? Am I the weird one here? I mean, yes, technically most fights should probably be that easy with such a varied team, but like, that was just boring to read with all that setup. I don't know. I don't like it. I don't like the first part. I actively dislike the second part. So yeah, overall, I gotta give it like a 3.5. I usually, when I'm reading it, I write down my ratings on this paper in front of me here. I have listed a 5 for this, but in just talking about it, I'm going way lower. 3.5 for this. It's just got issues. It's got so many problems. That B plot felt so unnecessary, and the A plot wasn't much better. So 3.5 for this. I don't like Teen Titans. iVampire number 6, written by Joshua Hale Fialkov and Andrea Sorrentino on art. We left off last issue with the gang of Batman, Andrew, John, and Tig coming across a horde of vampires led by Mary. And this issue picks up with the fight scene. It's pretty much one extended fight scene here where everyone's just trying to hold their own against this massive horde. And in the end, Tig starts throwing some axes around, trying to chop off some heads. And Andrew has to stop her, saying like, hey, they're not full vampires yet. We can still save them. And immediately Tig's like, what do you mean, man? And she's like, if we kill the person who made them vampires, they can still be saved. And Tig's like, excuse me? So at that point, he yells out to Mary, saying, call them off. But, ain't going to happen, clearly. And Batman tells Andrew that they need to fall back, but Andrew's like, no, I just need to find the guy who sired these vampires, because it's not Mary. Mary didn't do this herself. It's someone else here. And he takes a look around and he sees someone just kind of like sitting off in the corner, just like slightly protected. And Andrew flies his way over there and is just like, I'm going to kill that kid. And as he's literally saying this out loud, Batman screams no, throws a batarang at Andrew and takes him down, stopping him for a second. But as the one who Sire of the Vampires turns into a wolf form. Andrew does the same. They have a little fight off for a second, but he easily gets the better of the other vampire. And Andrew's like, okay, I'm sorry that this happened to you, but I have to make this right. And he chops off the guy's head, and immediately, like, half of the horde turns back into humans. And Mary is rightfully pissed about this and tells the rest of the horde to kill all of them. But Andrew gets in the way, turns into his big hulking form, and it's like, all right, the rest of these people here are all full-bloods, and they can't be saved, so we got to kill them all. And Batman's like, okay, Tig and John, you get the humans out of here. Me and Andrew will take care of the rest of the horde. And John makes sure to tell Batman, like, hey, Batman, they can't be saved. I want you to understand that. Batman's like, everyone can be saved. But Andrew is already just taking vampires, just crushing them in his hands. And Batman's like, hey, no more killing. And Andrew they're already dead. And Batman straight up tells him, no more death or I'm putting you down. And a vampire's about to come up behind Batman and bite him. And he just says, don't even think about it. And the vampire just backs off. So then we see Tig and John talking. And Tig asks for clarification about the whole, killing the sire thing in order to cure the vampires. And he's like, yeah, no, if you kill the person who made them a vampire, the curse is lifted. And Tig immediately just light bulb over the head and starts running back towards the fight. But then John calls out afterwards like, hey, you don't understand, that's only if it's within the first 72 hours. After that, the change is permanent. But didn't really get through to her. So anyway, Batman's still trying to justify being like, hey, these people are awful, evil people, but they are criminals and they deserve justice. And Mary hears this and just laughs, and she's like, okay, all right, arrest me then. Let's see it. And Batman's like, I know I can't do that. I know that I can't arrest you and just take you in, but I can subdue you and let one of my magic friends deal with you. And he throws I want to say batarang, but it's a rope that latches around her and electrocutes her. She screams for a second, but then just starts laughing and saying how much it tickles. And she conjures a knife out of nowhere, and it's just like, okay, I'm done playing with you. This ends now. And Andrew's like, this is the only way, Batman. And Batman's like, there's got to be something else we can do. And he's like, nope, the only way here is death. And then a sword goes through Andrew's chest, and he's like, oh no. And we see Tig is the one who did it. He's like, look, you made her, she made all them. If I kill you, all this goes away. You seem like one of the good ones, but this had to happen. And he's just like, you don't understand what you're doing here. And she's like, I understand, I'm saving the world. And she takes her axe, chops off Andrew's head. Mary's just getting a kick out of all this. And as he crumbles into dust, he realizes that his purpose here on Earth was to make the world a safe place for the things that from the things that he made. But as he crumbles, there's this loud boom and a screeching noise, and we see this hole open up in the ground, and a voice comes out along with a pair of hands saying that the end has come. And a person crawls out saying the sleeper has awoken. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Madame Xanadu is being talked to by Zatanna, and she's freaking out, saying that the vampires are all screaming. It's begun, Andrew Bennett is dead, and Cain, the sire of them all, has arisen. And thus introduces the first crossover of the New 52. iVampire and Justice League Dark is going to be a crossover called Rise of the Vampires, which we will deal with next month. But as for this issue, I really did enjoy this. I didn't think they would go through with killing Andrew. Straight up and out. When that happened, I was like, oh geez. How are we going to deal with this now? Because Andrew seemed to be the only one that was competent at doing anything to stop this. So I'm very much into it, and I'm super interested into what the crossover is going to be. Make sure you're listening to the Justice League Dark sections as well, if you've been listening to these, because that's where we're going to be covering it. But overall, this issue, I'm giving this an 8.5. My only criticism in the whole thing is that I know Batman has the no-kill rule, but he also, when it comes down to inhuman things or already dead things, he tends to make a lot of exceptions there, and I get that it's for the sake of telling the story here that he doesn't, but just from what I've seen, and even just like Justice League, I feel like he probably would have already made the exception here, regardless of, because they saved the humans they could. After that point, I feel like he should have been like, okay, you're right, let's let loose. Even if he doesn't do it himself, he should have at least allowed Andrew to. I don't know, maybe that's me, but I very much enjoyed this, and I am very much looking forward to seeing how this crossover. I'm guessing that they're at least going to take care of Kane, unless that's going to be the new villain story. I don't know. We'll see. Super interested, though. Definitely loving this book. Check it out if you haven't. Justice League Dark number 6, written by Peter Milligan, art by Mikel Janin. We left off last issue with Madame Xanadu telling all of the people that she used to fight against Enchantress that they have to form a team. But they're like, no, we're not doing that. All these people are awful. Bye. And she freaks out because, she saw the end of the world if they didn't. So this issue picks up. Constantine is in a burning London. Everything's on fire. Apparently he tried to run a scam where he just made up some magic words that allowed some bankers to believe they were going to get rich. But it actually happened, and it summoned demons. And now he's just trying to get it all back to good. He comes across Deadman and Zatanna, who are like, look at what you've done, this is all your fault. And then we see Zatanna freaking out that something is coming again. And we see, now she's out of London, it's this just wasteland, and there's this horde of bodies chasing after her, all running like in crab walk mode. And apparently one of her spells backfired. It took a life of its own. And before she can say anything to undo it, like, these bodies are shoving their hands into her mouth so she can't even scream. Cut to Shade the Changing Man, who is in a swamp trying to bring his dead girlfriend Kathy back to life. But this time he tells her, like, hey, I made you. You technically were a woman I loved, but you are your own person. You can choose your own name. And she's like, you're pathetic. Making woman, like, what is wrong with you? And it starts to morph into this giant like swamp monster, and attacks Shade. And as he wishes that he wasn't so scared, we cut over to Deadman, who just sees Dove, his ex-girlfriend now, just dead on the pavement in front of him. And apparently he is responsible for her death, and he's sorry for whatever he did. But then he goes into this black steam place, and he's like, oh, wait a minute, hold on, this isn't real, this is just like a waking nightmare sort of thing. Why is this happening to me? And he realizes, this only started happening once I jumped into the body of Constantine in the previous issue. I think he may have rubbed off on me. I'm going to go get some answers. So then we cut to Madame Xanadu's place, and Constantine's standing outside. He's about to walk in, but Deadman jumps in the way of the doorway, and he's like, hey, you're gonna have to wait, I need to talk to Xanadu about some of my own problems. And he's like, yeah, all right, by the way, I know who you are now, Boston brand circus performer, you kind of suck at your job. And he's like, I didn't fall, I was shot. And he's like, all right, whatever, point being, I need to go see Xanadu before you because I've got some nightmares. And he just storms through Boston, and Boston's like, wait, hold on, you got nightmares too? As they get inside, we see that Zatanna and Shade are already inside, and they're both like, everyone's just pissed off at each other. Shade and Constantine was the only one that was like kind of okay, but then Constantine just like, oh, you're an alien nutcase. So he pissed off at him too. They start to fight a little bit, but then Xanadu jumps in and says like, well, I'm glad everyone's getting along so well. And basically Constantine's the first one who's just like, okay, anyway, I got nightmares. And everyone's just like, yeah, you know what? I have nightmares too. And she's like, I'll explain everything. Does anyone know where Mind Warp is? Mind Warp's kind of crucial to this. And Shade chimes up. He's like, he said he was having problems with his seizure soul, but no, I don't know where he is. And anyway, can you tell us what's up? And she's like, okay, so here's the thing. The thing you are experiencing aren't actually nightmares. And then at that moment, the house they're in just breaks down, and that swamp monster from Shade's nightmare comes barging in. And Shade's like, I think my subconscious and my powers may have made this thing real. Uh-oh. And Zatanna tries using her magic against it. Doesn't work. And so Boston jumps into the body of Shade and, like, charges at it. But it, for some reason, destroys itself. Shade says that It wants to destroy him, but it can't because the magic would then go away, so it just destroyed itself out of anger or something. I don't really understand why that was in there, period. But regardless, Zatanna's like, cool, so at least 2 people can work together as a team. And Deadman's like, that wasn't teamwork. We had to do that. And Xanadu's like, yeah, exactly. So she explains that the nightmares they're having aren't technically nightmares, but they are visions of possible futures that will come to pass if the 5 of them don't form a team and work together. That includes Mind Warp. And they're like, do we really have to? And Xanadu's just, yes, you really have to. You don't have to like each other, but you do have to form a team. And as she's recounting that they need to go find Mind Warp in order to complete that and make sure their visions don't come to pass, she immediately starts freaking out and screaming. And she says how she can hear the screams of all the vampires. Andrew Bennett is dead, and Cain, the sire of them all, has arisen. And that brings us to the first crossover of the New 52 along with I, Vampires. It is the Rise of the Vampires was the name of the event, and that's going to be going on for the next 2 months. So if you haven't been checking out the I, Vampires segment of the show, definitely check that out as well. I highly, highly, highly recommend it. I really do love that book. As for this issue, I'm going to give this one a 7. It feels somewhat unnecessary. I feel like they had a 5-issue arc planned and were planning on making it so the team was made at the end of issue 5. But when they realized that they were going to be involved in this crossover starting with issue 7, they were like, okay, so we're just going to keep the team from getting together for an issue, and then we'll have this issue actually get them together, and we'll just kind of pad it out with like whatever stuff. And it's good team building. It's good like character development and showing how all these people interact with each other, because that wasn't really the focus of the previous arc. The previous arc was more setup than it was team dynamics, but it does feel pretty unnecessary overall. It just feels like, okay, we can't actually do anything immediately. We just need the team to be together for the crossover, where then they're going to do stuff supposedly as a team. We'll see. So yeah, I'm going to give this a 7, and it's good. It's fine, but it does feel pretty unnecessary in the gist of things. So I'm more excited for the crossover just because I love iVampire so goddamn much, but this is holding up well on its own as well. So looking forward to see how it contributes to that. The Ray, number 3, written by Justin Gray and Jimmy Palmiotti, art by Jamal Igle. We left off last issue with the Ray's girlfriend Shanti being abducted by some alien bug robot thing, and the Ray taking off after her. This issue picks up with him trying to break open, like how pill bugs curl up. That same sort of thing here, just trying to uncurl it and free Shanti, making sure she's all right. It's flying up too high, and apparently there isn't enough light for him to absorb. So because of that, he's starting to lose his power, and if he's this high up, they'll both die for sure. Meanwhile, a helicopter shows up and is like, hey, land that thing or we're taking fire. And he's like, dude, I'm trying to stop this thing. Come on. So he uses a bit of his light power in order to make a light dagger, jam it into the head of this thing, and it opens up and it lets Shanti out, and Shanti starts falling to the ground. He bounces off the helicopter, ricochets down and catches her, and she's unconscious. She's hurt in some way. So he calls for help. Some paramedics come in, and then we get 3.5 pages of him just trying to get into the ambulance because he's like, oh, I got to be with her. I have to be. And they're like, sir, you can just meet us at the hospital. You can't be in here. Also, all the other bugs are taking back off into the sky. They're just saying that. Whatever. So anyway, at the end of it, they won't let him into the ambulance. His best friend is there, and he's like, hey, just go to the hospital. I'll call her parents and let them know that he's there, or she's there. So then we cut to the hospital an hour later. She's fine. She just passed out. She fainted, and her parents are there, and they're like, all right, you're good. Can we take you home? And as they're walking out, they see Lucian is standing there arguing with the nurse, saying that he has to be in there. He has to see her, make sure she's okay. They see each other, they hug, they make sure everything's fine. Shanti's happy. Like, she's like, oh, the paramedic said that you saved me. Thank you so much. But the parents are still just standing there angrily because they feel like the whole reason their daughter was put into this in the first place is because of Lucian. And Lucian tries to, like, justify. He's like, look, I know I was an idiot, but, like, I am also a hero. Like, I'm not the screw up you think I am, blah, blah, blah. But as he's explaining this, there's a voice from off panel, and it is that filmmaker from, I think, the end of the first issue. And he's like, oh, I know you're a hero. That's why I want you to be in my movie. I know you're the Ray. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about, mister. You clearly have escaped from the psychiatric ward. How about you go on back? And I don't know who he's trying to pretend to here. Like, it sounds like he's trying not to let on to someone, but everyone here knows. But he's just, like, still trying to play off that he's not the Ray. But anyway, as Shanti is being dragged away by her parents, I was like, all right, enough, we're leaving. Lucian tries to give chase, and as soon as he turns away from the movie guy, the movie guy's like, don't you walk away from me. And he, like, teleports in front of the parents, and we see, like, these dark tendrils forming off him, and he's like, you're not the only one with powers around here. And we see him make it, like, just the dumbest looking costume. Like, it's a Tron suit, but, like, with a cape and a Magneto helmet. It's just stupid. And the parents are like, see, now you've got us wrapped up in another thing. And the movie guy is saying, like, all right, I can see you need motivation to get involved with me. And he just reaches out his hand, and immediately Shanti's father starts having a heart attack. And, of course, they're in a hospital, so people rush to his aid. But Lucian's like, hey, whatever you're doing, you need to stop now. And he's like, well, then, I need you to decide whether or not you're in or out. And so Ray charges him, gets full powered up, and we get into a superpower fight. And immediately he can see he is hopelessly outclassed. Like, this guy is so much more powerful. And apparently his powers are anything he wants, he can make a reality. He is able to just reality warp, which is incredibly strong. But regardless, he keeps on trying to hold up the fight and trying to get more info out of this guy because he's clearly not all mentally there. He's barely able to, like, keep a thought for more than a few seconds. And he's like, all right, so what's your motivation? Is it money? Is it whatever? And he's like, I don't care about money. I'm doing this to tell a good story. And he's like, all right, well, the movies aren't real. Like, real people are getting hurt because of the things you're doing. And he's like, people, I don't care about people. I care about the art. And then he goes over like, people said I was crazy for letting them eat me on tape. And then they said I was crazy for getting reborn with 100 yards of film that was dumped in a Lazarus pit. Some things are just worth the art. And so some police start coming up, and he's like, good, props. That's what makes a real blockbuster different than an indie film, some props. And the cops are like, all right, both of you hands up, or we will arrest you. And he's like, hey, I'm trying to talk him down. I'm not the enemy. I'm doing that. But the cops keep on escalating more and more. They get closer and closer with the guns. Ray's trying to explain himself and saying, like, I'm trying to help you guys here. And as soon as the tension reaches a mounting point, the movie guy's like, all right, and action. And he turns the cops' cars into transformers, like literal robots. And he even makes the thing is like, what do you think? Giant robots. How cool is that? And the Ray's like, that's very inventive. Can you turn them back? And he's like, nope, here we go. And the fight scene starts. The robots start attacking the cops. Ray jumps in, saves them as best he can. Still trying to ask how he does that, despite the fact he very clearly said he has reality warping powers. But regardless, he's not really able to do much against these robots, and they just start wailing on him. And after a little bit, he's like, maybe you aren't the hero I needed, because you're getting beat pretty easy. So we see Lucian lying bloodied and just back in his human form on the ground, and the movie guy's just looking on like, that's disappointing. And then we get a shout from behind saying, turn around, you piece of garbage. And we see Shanti standing there with a gun held to the guy's head saying, you murdered my father and my boyfriend. Now I'm going to kill you. And that's where we leave off. So this is a 4-issue series, and I don't feel like we're close to the end. Like, this feels like the middle of, like, a 6-issue arc, which at one point this was on the issue itself credited as 6 issues. I don't know if that was a misprint, but it is only 4. So I don't know how we're going to wrap this up quickly. I don't know, like, what the final thing is going to be. I, of course, think Lucian's alive, but and I'm hoping the father is as well. Otherwise, that's very dark for just a 4-issue thing. In terms of this issue, liking it, it's fine. I think it's very decently done. I think it forwards the plot much more so. Like, the first issue was just exposition, and the second issue honestly felt pretty much like, okay, now that we've established the exposition, here's a day in the life for the Ray, and here's how it gets interrupted. This issue feels like it's actually doing something. So I like it more so because of that. But it also feels, because I know where the ending point is, it feels like it didn't get enough done. Like, maybe the fourth issue can do it, and I shouldn't critique this issue because of what the next issue may or may not do, but it does feel like it's just, we're still in the middle of the story, and we're almost at the end in terms of when we're going to get there. So overall, I give this maybe I give it a 6. And it probably deserves a little bit more than that, but I'm giving it that just because, like, this feels like so much beginning of the story stuff, just setting up the villain and all that. I don't know how we're going to wrap this all up in one issue, but that is for next month. So we'll see how they manage to do that at that point. And that's it. That's all the comics that came out from DC Comics this February 22nd, 2012. And I have quite a few things I need to say before going into next week. So, number 1, comics for next week. There are a limited amount because it is a 5th week. Last time I had some filler stuff because we only had 1 comic, but this time we got 3. We have Justice League number 6, Legion Secret Origin number 5, and The Shade number 5. However, I am going to be also covering all of the backups from the first 6 issues of everything that we've been talking about. I believe that includes Action Comics, All-Star Western, and a couple other ones, but I'm going to have to go back and check through. But I will read and review all of the backups that have been featured in those issues. Additionally, because of the way that years work, so back in 2012, the next week was February 29th. 2012, but I am doing this in 2022, and there is no February 29th. So, because there was a leap year back then, this show is going to be shifting from a Tuesday release to a Monday release from now on. I'm sorry if that has messed with your schedule, but it's the way it will be. Additionally, that is for YouTube. I'm trying to get the audio uploads to go up at the same time, and I'm not pointing any fingers here, but I'm not the one who's in charge of the audio uploads, so shame on the guy who is for making them so very, very late. But that is pretty much all I really need to cover, so keep an eye out for us changing to Mondays pretty much until 2016. And then we'll go back to Tuesdays again. That'll be fun. But yeah, so hope to see you around next weekend. Of course, we have a Twitter at DC Comics Podcast. We have a Patreon, Mild Fuzz TV. As low as $1 can get you some stuff. But I don't particularly care about that at all. All I care about is you and your well-being. And the fact that you're going to be here next week. Because it's going to be a very, very boring week without you. I miss you. I'm going to bed now. All right. And as always, try to remember, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.